Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Hey guys, welcome. All right, so today, before I get started with When Kids Are Hard on Themselves, part 2, my little nugget is very exciting news. So if you have been with me as a member on Patreon, we have moved platforms. I found a platform that is much more interactive, where it functions like a Facebook group, but it's not on Facebook. It's our own platform. It's like my own little private Facebook. And so if you were a member on Patreon, we migrated you over. And what you have to do is now look out for an email so you can create and log into the new platform. After you do that, you'll go back to Patreon and cancel your membership there. And this is all going very, very seamless, but I find that a few people are slipping through the cracks. So I wanted to say it right on the podcast so that you get this message. And if you weren't a member on Patreon and you're interested in joining our community, which is going to be so much fun, we're going to do live talks once a week, and I'll be doing shorter videos answering questions. We do have a wait list for that. So just let me know if that's something you would like to do and get on that wait list. All right, jumping in. So I want to read the question that I got from a patron on Patreon. This is part 2 of this subject, and this is when kids are hard on themselves and they physically melt down. So this tends to be just like the child who verbally berates themselves. This tends to be when they can't do something well or right or the correct way or what they think it should look like, and or they're being reprimanded for something and it results in a meltdown. This I have seen look like a 3-year-old tantrum. You know, the whole like on the floor, kicking and screaming, but mostly it ends up being just crying, like an epic tear fest, you know, with the hiccups and everything. I have seen this. I think this is such an important question. I'm reading this mama's question, but this comes up a lot. And I also noticed this when I coached my son's Little League. And so Pascal's going to be 18. We're going back 10 years. 8 to 10 years. And I was shocked because I was working with 12 and 13-year-old boys who, if they struck out, you know, threw the bat, cried, got down, banged their hands on the home plate. It was astounding to me because by that age, you certainly should have some self-control. And I couldn't fathom what was happening. But it since has come up a lot in my work. So let me read the question first. And again, this may not be your exact scenario, but I think it's pretty indicative of what's out there. I'm reaching out about my son. He's 6 and he wanted to try out ninja classes. He's extremely hard on himself. He's not one of those kids that just throws himself around. If he can't do something in the class, he immediately starts to cry and shuts down. Sometimes after doing it a few times, he does get it, but it doesn't help him realize that the more he does something, the better he gets. He had a class yesterday and he had an epic meltdown because he couldn't tumble forward. I had to remove him and get some air outside. I tried practicing with him at home, thinking the pressure would be off, but it resulted in more epic meltdowns. How can I help him through understanding that he doesn't have to be good at everything? As long as he has fun, it doesn't even matter. Then she went on to say, during class, he's always looking over at me when he does something successfully, almost like he's doing it for approval. I don't like it when he does that, but I feel obligated to give him a thumbs up. When he doesn't do something, he also looks over at me and I still give him a thumbs up, but that means nothing if he doesn't get the actual action. He still cries. Should I leave during class for a little while? Oh, wait, there's a little bit more. Should I leave class for a little while? But then I'll feel awful if he bawls his eyes out and I'm not there. Quitting is not an option. Okay, so this mirrors like my Little League experience. And this typically comes down to one of a few things, and it could be a combination of things. So the few things are, number one, nervous learner. So there are kids who are just real nervous learners, and they are perfectionists out of the gate, and it has to be right. My own son fell into that category. The next thing is, are they addicted to approval? So we can get ourselves in a track, and I say addicted like quote unquote, it's not really an addiction, but you get if you're constantly seeking approval and we the parents give it, it becomes a crutch, and it can almost become like a tick almost, it's like just constantly looking at you, constantly looking at you, constantly looking at you, and you then feel the need to give some approval, but then it feeds that sort of anxiety. And the last thing is that it could be that the child has no distress tolerance. It is no secret. And believe me, I am constantly watching myself because I also fall into this category, particularly, I think, if you were Gen X. Even if you're like an older millennial, younger Gen X, we were the first generation, well, not the first generation. We were latchkey kids. We were feral. You've seen the memes, I'm sure. We were neglected. We were forgotten about. Literally, there was a television commercial that said, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Because our parents kind of just forgot about us. So the rebound effect, of course, is we always try to make things better for our children. Unfortunately, we have cushioned life for our children so much. And so there's often no distress tolerance. So those are sort of the three categories that could be at play here. And we'll go through each one. But as I said in part one of this, when kids are hard on themselves, you have to think of this as a tantrum of sorts. Like, even if they're not doing the full blown throwing things, banging their head against the floor, it is still a tantrum of a variety, meaning it is a big feeling that comes up. It's a big, overwhelming feeling, and your child does not know how to cope with it. So like anything else, any other tantrum, we're going to ride that arc that I talked about in part one. You're going to ride the arc and not try to fix, fade, or negate the behavior, especially as it's peaking. Now, with this mama, she was in a class. So it's very tempting when you're in public to just shush the whole thing as soon as humanly possible, right? Like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So many flooding emotions happen to us as parents. Like, not only are we in public, not only is my kid a little bit older and really shouldn't be reacting this way, he's the only one reacting this way. I'm a terrible mom. My kid has no self-esteem. They think they're terrible. There's so many emotions that we have all at once. And so our first instinct, of course, is, no, you've got it. You can do it. We do this cheerleading. Don't do that. It will not be helpful. And in this scenario, we don't want to do cheerleading at all. This child has to come to some decisions on their own. I want to say grit. They do have to come to some resiliency and grit, but it has to be on their own. We can foster some things, and I'm definitely going to go into that, but we cannot hand that to them through words. We cannot hand that to them by being a cheerleader to the nth degree. It's not empty praise, because I know you mean it, but it is empty in these moments because your child is feeling something big and overwhelming. And if I say, I am so mad at myself, and you say, no, you're not, fuck off. Yes, I am. I'm an adult. And when I'm mad at myself, I know how to express it appropriately. It's very short-lived. I know how to move through the feelings, but you telling me that I am not happy with myself, or I don't like myself in this moment, you telling me that that's not true does not help me. Okay. So it's really important that you hold that space while your child's going through this. With this particular child, it's really important that you stay fairly neutral. Most of the time, we think we're being neutral, but we're not. There's tons going on in our face, And so you want to just be neutral and let your child have the emotion. Okay. So let's go through these one at a time. And again, just like part one, you don't try to fix it. Like, let's say with this mama, takes the child out, they get a breath of fresh air. Don't process. Don't cheerlead. Don't, okay, you can try it again. Just be like, are you ready to go back to class? Okay, awesome. That's it. As neutral as possible. Great that you want to go back. Happy to bring you back inside. So with the nervous learner, what can you do? So the nervous learner, there have always been nervous learners, but there is an uptick of super anxious kids, and it's because of school. School has set things up right now. Academics, the craze over academics makes me crazy. You guys know that. I talk about Pascal's friends, and it's just 5 of his friends are on antidepressants and 2 are on anti-ulcer, like ulcer medications. So, and this cropped up after their junior year and their senior year of high school. And it's totally correlated to stress about college and what you've got to do and get extracurriculars and your grades. And so the academics has gone off the freaking chain. And I've bitched about this before on this podcast, so it's nobody's surprise. Check in with school though. What are the systems in place for when a mistake is made? What is going on at school? Because if your child is spending a large portion of their day at school, I do find that these nervous learners, there is a tie to the schoolwork or there's some pressure at school. And so I would check in there first. It was one thing that Pascal, he was a nervous learner in school, and he would like erase paper till it was shredded. Like you couldn't even use the paper. And so when I started homeschooling, a lot of that healed. And I know a lot of you aren't in a position to just start homeschooling. But one of the things we did, I had read an educator, Andrew Padua, who recommends writing with pen. And when you write with pen, you can't go back and erase. And so it eliminates a lot of time. And it actually, there's a whole YouTube talk on it if you want to look it up. He, found that there's pressure as a pencil gets down in lead, it becomes harder to write. So your hand gets sore. So a pen does a smoother write. It's easier. There's no wasting time in sharpening and erasing. And then when you make a mistake, you simply cross out the word and just keep writing. And it keeps the child in the flow of writing. And I also just think that's a really handy tool if you have a perfectionistic, nervous learner kid who might start to cry when they make a mistake on paper. The next thing is with a nervous learner is you want to seek out activities that a lot of people are making a mistake. I live in the Northeast. When I took this on with Pascal, we immediately started to ski and ice skate. Skiing, watching other people fall on their ass all the time is very comforting to kids, right? Because I think it looks like we have our shit all together all the time, right? And so when you do something like skiing, there's a ton of people falling on their butts, right? And so that can be fun. Ice skating, the great thing about ice skating is I suck at it. So he got to see me fail at it. Now, obviously, there's plenty of people who don't live in ski country or ice skating country. So, you can find some sort of, if you can think of an activity, an outside activity where adults are making a lot of mistakes, that can be really, really helpful. I've brought this up before. Pascal started taking drum lessons when he was 6, and I just couldn't deal with like another lesson that I had to just sit in the car and read a book. So I decided I would take guitar lessons at the same music center. So we started taking music lessons together, and I forget what chord it was because I play ukulele now. I don't play guitar because it was too hard. So I think it was an F chord. I'll just call it the F chord. I don't remember what chord it was, but it was so hard, and like my hands wouldn't do the right thing, and I would cry. I would just like start crying. I was so frustrated, and he was like, "Mommy, what's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm just so frustrated that I can't get this." And it became a family joke. Anytime something was hard, he'd be like, "Oh, this looks like an F chord." When, he got very good at skiing, and we'd go do a black diamond, which are the harder runs. And he'd look down and he'd be like, "That's an F chord." And so it became a family thing of huge frustration when you can't get something. So maybe you, the parent, take on something new in front of your child, or take on something new that maybe your child's good at. Dude, if your kid plays Minecraft and you don't, I highly suggest you play Minecraft, because the first time I played Minecraft, I slammed into a wall, an imaginary wall, for 30 minutes before I gave up. Like, I just don't do video games. And so if you aren't a gamer yourself, something like that, or Roblox, or something that your kid is really good at and you suck at, you can mirror, you can start to reflect back to them and model what frustration looks like. But it also models people suck at things. Now, if none of these situations are appropriate for you, you can always look up YouTube videos of people failing at things. If you can search on Instagram, with Reels, if you find an audio you like, you can, when you pull up the audio, you can pull up all the videos that have used that reel. And one is Smash Mouth All-Star, somebody once told me the world is gone, right? On that somebody, they use that for gym mistakes. So you see people who fail at lifting weights or doing a pull up, and it's brutal because it's a little violent because people do hurt themselves, but it is the funniest thing ever. And so if you can look up something like that where your child sees people making really big mistakes, I find that helps too. But I would definitely, again, I would really dive into what's going on at school, because a lot of these nervous habits come from not thinking you can't make a mistake. And so I'm throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall because all of your situations might be different. But I had no idea till we started homeschooling that Pascal was nearly traumatized by red marks, being wrong. To him, I've always said he came into the world with this weird amount of shame that it's got to be past life, because I would look at him cross-eyed and he'd start to cry that I was yelling at him, and I hadn't even uttered a sound. So he's very, very sensitive to that. But so this wrong, you're wrong, he felt a deep shame about it. And so when we first started homeschooling, I literally had to throw out every red pen. I was like, buddy, I'm not gonna mark anything wrong. We're just gonna learn from it. And so I do think a lot can stem from there. So I would investigate a little bit on that point. The next category, addicted to approval. Yeah. And so again, like I said, you can start to almost get, there is a dopamine high when somebody constantly is approving of your things. It's why social media is such a hit, right? Somebody likes your post. Woohoo! I'm popular, right? They've scientifically proven it hits the brain, and that's what keeps people kind of coming back for more. So that's what can happen if you're constantly approving. So I would generally check yourself, and none of these, when I say check yourself, you guys, these are all, you're not a bad parent. You haven't fucked it up. We get into grooves that sometimes we're not even aware of, right? I mean, good job is one of them. How many times do we say, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job, right? It loses its meaning. And so a lot of times we can, falsely think that we're helping their self-esteem by kind of approving them, or we may not even know it though. It may not be a conscious thing. It may just be oh, you're great. We think our kids are great. Nobody says, oh, that was terrible, right? You're like, well, you tried. It was a good effort. We praise outcome, right? But what really struck me about this mama's question was that her kid kept looking at her constantly for class, for good, for bad. It's that thing. And this starts, if you have younger kids, everything relies on you in the beginning, right? Your facial expressions when their kids are babies, when they're toddlers, they're really looking at us, to us, for how should I be feeling, right? So very classic, your child, falls on the sidewalk and they look to you. Now, if you freak out, they're going to freak out. If you're like, oh my goodness, you fell. How are you're fine. Let's get up. And so that child's just going to react that way. They are really watching us for what they should be feeling. So this could have started a long time ago, and it almost becomes second nature. So again, I'm not blaming you. I'm not faulting you. I don't want you to take on any guilt or shame about that. You didn't fuck it up, but it's something to kind of go and go oh shit, yeah, I do. I'm constantly letting them know how to feel. And it does kind of sound like this little guy's got that going on, because it's oh, I failed. How should I feel? Although he doesn't feel that way. She gives him a thumbs up and he doesn't. He still cries. I think one of the things you can do is in any given situation, stay neutral. So if it is a class situation like this, she asked, do you think I should leave? Yes, I think you should leave. When I coached baseball, I would ask the parents to not stay. And if the child was acting or reacting during a game, I would ask the parent to go farther, farther away so the child wasn't like seeing their face right there. Because I did see this a lot, like looking to the parent, like, did I do good? Did I do good? Did I do good? And so we don't want our children relying on us to tell them they did good. We want our children to get that sense of like, I did good. Even if I struck out, I did good, right? And so we want them to praise their own effort and their own outcome, and that will help them not be so crushed by these failures. A way, and say you're not in a class setting, say you're at home and this happens. Again, stay neutral, let it arc, let it come down. When your child regulates, again, you're staying calm and curious and regulated. You're not rushing in to fade, fix, or negate any of the emotions. You're just staying present, right? That extreme presence with inaction. And you feel your child start to regulate, just move on with the day. Okay, great. Do you want to go try that again, or you want to move on to something else? Sweet. Let's go. Come help me clean the kitchen. Something, anything, right? You could do something like that. Then what I would do is at the end of the day, I would be sure to do some version of roses and thorns, highs and lows. People call them all different things. Hey, what was your highlight? What was your low light? What was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And then let's see if the worst part of the day was this crushing moment that caused this epic meltdown. Maybe it wasn't. And that'll give you a good barometer as to, where your child is. Is this really crushing, or was this a momentary overwhelming feeling? And that might be you do some roses and thorns and you say, hey, a low light for me or a thorn for me today was when, you got so upset when you couldn't do that thing. And, I'm just curious how you're feeling about it now. And what do you think we can do next time so that maybe the feelings aren't quite so big? And so you can get your child's input, especially at this age. You're going to get so much information because it's not like dealing with a 3-year-old tantrum who, like, God knows why they just lost their shit, right? They don't even know. They're just like, their skin's inside out and everything's reactionary. Whereas these older kids, they're going to give you some really good information. Do not, in any of these things, like I've said it in many ways, but I had written it down a little different. Don't hype your child up. Just don't hype them. The instinct is there. It's like, cheerleading, hyping, whatever you want to call it, is like we're overinflating them, and it's empty. It's empty air. It doesn't land. That hype doesn't work, and it can add fuel to the fire because it can add an expectation onto the child. And if you do that with a nervous learner, they're gonna maybe bend a little more towards perfectionism. So you definitely don't want to hype the child. And as for leaving. She said that she didn't want to leave him alone in case he had a meltdown. So this is one of those scenarios where we engage the village, right? So number one, I would go to whatever class you have. This was a ninja class. I would go to the person in charge. And I know sometimes in gymnastics, dance, martial arts, all these things that we put kids in, sometimes it can be a young adult leading the class who may not have child skills. That often does happen. So take this with a grain of salt if that's your case. But I would also definitely go to the director or whoever runs the facility. But I would enact the village and say, listen, this is what we're working on. I'm going to leave the building. Here's my cell phone. I need to know if he's reacting this way, if it's me, if I need to be gone. But if things escalate and my child gets out of control, you can absolutely call me. I'll just be in the car. I'll just be outside. And I'm sure 99% of the time, I'm sure everyone's going to say, thank you, go. Because children act different when we, the parents, aren't there, particularly mom. So I would definitely leave. And I wouldn't worry in these are really big, overwhelming feelings. This isn't the same as a 3-year-old not knowing, again, what the hell is going on with their emotions. This child, it's a little more contained, even though it's a meltdown, right? It is still a little more contained. And you have to risk letting them be on their own, because you being there at 6, 7, 8 years old to pick up the pieces, your child's never going to learn how to pick up the pieces themselves. And so they have, part of life is we all get overwhelming feelings, all of us. And it's not that you have to swallow those overwhelming feelings, but we all have to learn how to be in society. We do have to mask in some respect, because we can't all just be melting down all the time, right? And so we want the child to gain those skills. And if we keep picking up the pieces, they will never learn that skill. And maybe it will be that they're having a super hard time. Maybe their lip is quivering. Maybe they feel like crying. And maybe the coach sees that. Maybe the coach ignores it. Or maybe the coach is like, hey, man, it's cool. Come sit by me for a minute. So again, this varies widely, because it really depends on the experience of the coach or the person leading the class. It depends. Hopefully you have a good adult there who understands. I would assume if they're teaching children's classes that your child is not the first child to melt down. So, but ask for help, tell them your intention, give them their cell phone number and say, I will gladly step in if you need me to, but I need to get out of this situation so my child can learn to develop these skills on their own. And any coach, dude, when parents would say that to me, do you think I should not be at practice? I was like, yeah, go right now. And the child would. Some kids had a hard time. Some kids would. Their lip would start to quiver. I could see they were holding it in, which is a skill, you guys. And we do have to practice that skill at a certain age. A 3-year-old can't do that. A 6-year-old needs to start practicing that skill. And so, you can look at it like, oh my God, they're stuffing in their feelings. But we do have to do a fair amount of stuffing in our feelings when we're out in society. And then we learn how to process them. We don't want to stuff them and bury them. We want to, get them out in a healthy way. But I don't think in these situations that you staying and helping with that right now at this age is helpful. All right. And then the last one. Okay. This isn't one of the categories, but I wanted to bring this up. This isn't under distress tolerance, but this can look like low self-esteem. And actually, it can be an inflated false self-esteem. It's very rooted in a selfishness. And I say that in the like a true meaning of selfishness, in that I'm self-centered. This is about me not being able to do it. They're not seeing the crowd, because there's plenty of kids failing physically in every class, no matter what class you're taking. And it is I want to say it's sort of the pop psychology version of narcissism. It's not narcissism, like true narcissist is a mental disorder, but it is the myth of Narcissus, which, he got enamored of his reflection. It is a sense of, I need to be perfect or everything is wrecked, right? And so don't always take it from like, oh my God, my kid doesn't have good self-esteem, or it may not even be them being hard on themselves. It's more an issue of like, I need to do this perfectly or everything crumbles. And this tends to be a first child trait. Second kids are YOLO. They don't care. Your third is feral. Your fourth is just a whole nother animal. So what you want to do is you want to look for other areas where your child might be taking on too much, or being inordinately self-centered or self-focused. So this could be even, maybe going and volunteering at a soup kitchen, where your child can see people who have things much harder. This can be, I would watch for traits. This is often not something the parents are putting on the child, but first children think they are a sub-parent. Yeah, I've seen it time and time and time again. They take on a role that you may have been very careful. They don't have to watch their siblings. They don't have to be in charge of their siblings, but very often beyond our control, we say things like, come on, you're older. You should just give that to them. Or you know better. You're older, you're older, you're older. And they can start to take on this role. So I would just kind of scan your family horizon and see, and try to look at your kid through like squinty eyes and watch them with siblings. Are they taking on a parentified role? And it doesn't have to be scary. These psychology terms like parentification and narcissism, they can sound scary. I'm talking about the very, very light version, but are they assuming a sub-parent role? And again, nothing that you've done. And then I would move into correct that. You don't have to be responsible for your little brother like that, Unfortunately, I think most parents expect their kids to be responsible or, help their little siblings. So you might want to ease up on that kind of talk, or just kind of see if that could be going on. Let's move on to no distress tolerance. This is a big one. Again, we've made our kids' lives so freaking cushy. Like, we just have. And I am just convinced it's because we were neglected. And so it makes sense, right? Yeah, my mom didn't even know what the SATs were. Like, never mind signing me up for SAT prep. She didn't know that you had to do college application fees. So, like, yeah, they talk about neglect, right? Of course, I turned out fine, but, well, after 30 years of therapy, right? But the distress tolerance is huge. And part of it is we, the parents, don't have distress tolerance. So we can't handle our kids being upset. So we rush in to fix it. So a couple of things to look out for with this is, are you a fixer? So do you rush in to fix? And I see this all the time, like out in the world. And it's something I did it for about 6 months until I super trained myself not to, which is, here, give me that. I'll do it. You know how to do things. And so we can grab things from our kids. I've watched people in grocery stores be like, oh, no, you don't know how to do it. I'll do it. So that's like a subtle thing of like, I don't want to see you struggle. So I'm going to rush in and I'm going to help you. We have, more and more schools are implementing no rescue policy. So if your kid forgets their mittens and it's winter, their hands are going to freeze. Guess what? They'll remember their mittens tomorrow. You can't bring in things anymore. You can't go to school and bring their homework, their water bottle, their lunch, their mittens. Like, they have to suffer some consequences. Otherwise, they're never going to learn. They're just going to rely on us. Dude, I just read an article. I just thought of this. I just read an article earlier today. Gen Z, which I forget, Pascal's in Gen Z, but I think he's like a older Gen Z. I forget the exact years. They're bringing their parents to job interviews because they can't handle a job interview by themselves. So this is what we're creating. So we have to be really cautious of this. This is a societal problem. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it, but we're creating problems for our kids if we do too much for them and we don't let them experience real life consequences, real distress. And part of this may be, like with this Mama and Ninja class, leaving and letting your child experience the distress and see how that feels. Maybe going outside for a breath of fresh air isn't the best thing. Maybe it's like, okay, well, you got to sit and your peers are going to watch you melting down. That is uncomfortable. Yes, that is distress tolerance. And so that may change the behavior subtly or not so subtly. So that is number one. As far as like physical things, I've said this many times and it just bears repeating. And I know just, of course, where you live, this may not be an option, but climbing mountains is the best thing I know. It's almost the only thing I know to build true grit and resiliency and distress tolerance, because, and even a really steep hill, right? Because there's a top, there's this amazing goal that's just inherent, right? And so most kids, I've climbed mountains with all ranges of kids, all ages, all temperaments, and this is the best deal ever. So there's this inherent goal, right? The top. So the kid's like, there's no question, you're getting to the top. So they're raring to go, and you bring snacks and you bring friends. Yeah, don't try to go with just one kid because they'll bitch and moan the whole time. You do need snacks, lots of snacks, and other kids. And so they run to the top and then they're tired, or maybe they got a blister, or maybe they're out of snacks or out of water, and you have to get down the mountain. And this is where I've heard every single kid bitch and moan. But here's the kicker. no one's coming to get you. You're too big for me to carry you. You got to get down that mountain. And they do something hard. And that's what builds self-esteem. And they get down and they're like, I did it. I did it without any more water. I did it with a blister. I did it. I did something hard. And so if you can get to a mountain, get to a steep hill or not like a rock climbing gym, but maybe a bouldering near you or something. I know there's plenty of flat land in this country. So if you live in flat land, this may not be available to you, but whenever you can, I really think this is the best way ever to really conquer something without you doing any approval, any cheerleading, any hype. It's just like, you got to get down the mountain. Like that's all there is to it. And so that's my key for distress tolerance, but also just really watch when you step into rescue, watch when you step in, pay attention to your child. Like, is there something that they make mistakes at that they don't melt down? Right? So there are plenty of things. This goes on to my whole philosophy of school. When people, as a homeschooler, people will say to me, well, they have to learn how to do things they hate. And I was like, anything that you take on, there's going to be a portion of it that you hate. You will always learn to do things you hate. No, I don't need to force things on my child that he hates. Like he played drums for years and he had to do drills and he hated it and he wanted to switch instruments. And I was like, no, you're not switching instruments. You're going to play the drums. You can switch instruments, but there's going to be drills in guitar. There's going to be drills in piano. There's going to be drills in clarinet. So whatever you choose, you're going to get to this same spot. And you're going to have to work through it. And he was like, all right, never mind. I'll work through it with drums. Hated it. It was a year of drilling and he hated it. So yes, but he didn't melt down about it because he made his choice. So look and see, because is it Legos? Can your child be frustrated with Legos and not melt down? Can they be frustrated with Minecraft and not melt down? So look for these areas. And that's where you want to do a little hype. That's where you want to say like, hey, I noticed that you got like you can get really frustrated and not have a meltdown, like I saw you with your Legos, you were really struggling there and I saw you work through it. So yeah, like I love seeing you work through things. Remember, no good job. Try to stay away from the praise. With this kid in particular, no praise. Just as much as you can, stay neutral and reflect back the hard work, the effort. I saw you. Yeah. And you can literally just say that. Oh yeah, I saw you. You don't have to say, I saw you. You did great. It was amazing. Yeah, I saw you. And then, oh, did you see me fall? Yeah, I saw you. We don't have to give all that information. And just like with the tantrum, and as I talked about in part 1, we really want to process way later in the day, and always ask your child again, at this age, you're going to get so much feedback. Hey, how could we have done this different? When you melt down, it kind of takes time out of the class. Everybody's watching, maybe ask them for ideas because they may have some really great ideas. And again, be prepared for anything that comes out of their mouths. Sometimes kids can say things that sound really catastrophic and can break our hearts, but never react to those things, like, oh, I hate myself, and this is when the child, when processing, may go into verbally berating themselves. So all the same rules apply. All right. I hope that's helpful for you guys. As always, I appreciate you guys listening. And again, if you were a member of Patreon, we have migrated you over to our new platform. Please look out for the email to create and log into your account. And I'll see you there. And everybody else, if you'd like to get on a wait list, you can DM us on Instagram and we will put you on the wait list for this awesome community that I'm so excited about. Okay. Rock on. Have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.